Good morning, I'm Winston Boykin. I'm the trainer at one of the trainers at Union High School. And I'm going to demonstrate today a pre-trip of a school bus. You have a time limit of 40 minutes on the test, so everything we do today has to be completed in a satisfactory manner within 40 minutes. So we're going to move a little bit quick in some areas. So I'm going to start right here with the entryway. I'm going to check my door here to make sure it opens and closes properly. And it does. I'm going to check my rubber stripping here to make sure it is secure to the bus. It's not frayed or cut or worn in any way. I'm going to check my glass to make sure it's clean, not cracked, broken, or damaged or missing. I'm going to check the flooring of my bus to make sure it is secure and there are no trip hazards here. Also, I'm going to check both of my handrails to make sure they are secure. And then I will check my loading lights inside and outside, make sure they are clean, not cracked, broken, or missing. Then I'm going to get up in the bus, and the next thing I'm going to check is emergency equipment. I'm going to start right up here in my emergency equipment compartment. We do not have fuses. We run on circuit breakers, so I don't have to have any spare fuses. I'm going to open my door here. I'm going to check my body fluid cleanup kit, my first aid kit, make sure they are secure to the bus and properly stocked. Check my fire extinguisher, make sure it is secure to the bus. Check my gauge and make sure it's in green, meaning it's properly charged. Check my pin on my fire extinguisher, make sure it's inserted. I'm going to check my inspection tag to make sure it has a recent inspection. Here I'm going to check my emergency triangles for the road if I break down. This box is secure to the bus, and it should be 3 triangles in there that are in good operating condition. Then I'm going to do to the back of the bus, I'm going to walk to make sure that the flooring is secure all the way back in the bus. As I go back, I'm going to check the backs of the seats to make sure they all are secure. And here I'm going to check my emergency exit windows. There are 5 of them. I have 2 on each side and 1 in the back. I'm going to make sure they are properly marked and make sure the instructions on how to open, lift handle, push are clearly on the window there. I'm going to check both of my emergency exit hatches here and 1 in the back. Make sure they are properly marked and the instructions are turn in the direction of the arrows and push up, and that would open them. Now I'm going to check my emergency exit door. I have to check 1 alarm system, emergency alarm system for an exit, and we're going to do the door. So I'm going to have to turn the key on, and I'm going to go back to the emergency door. I'm going to make sure the emergency door is properly marked here and here. I'm going to raise the handle. When I raise the handle, the emergency alarm should sound, and it does. Then I'm going to open the door to the open lock position, and I have, and then I'm going to release the door to close it back. And the alarm goes off. Then I'm going to walk up to the front of the bus. As I go up to the front, I'm going to check my seats to make sure they are all secure, no loose or damaged seats anywhere. I'll check those going up. Okay, that's the back of the bus and the emergency equipment. Now I'm going to sit in the seat and perform a pre-trip of this area here. First thing when I do when I'm seated always is grab a seat belt. I'm going to check here to make sure it is secure to the bus. I'm going to check the belt itself to make sure it is not damaged, frayed, cut, or worn. And I'm going to make sure it snaps securely. Then I'm going to check all my mirrors to make sure they are clean, not cracked or broken or missing, including my student mirror. I'm going to make sure they are adjusted for my use. I'm going to check my windshield to make sure it's clean, not cracked, broken, or missing. Then I'm going to check my windshield wipers to make sure they are secure to the bus. I will look at the blades, make sure they are secure, they're not excessively worn, and they're lying flat against the windshield. With that, I'm going to do a safe start. So I'm going to turn the bus on. I'm going to make sure my ABS light comes on and goes off. I'm going to make sure I'm in neutral. I'm going to make sure my parking brake is set, and then I'm going to start the bus. With that, I'm going to start over here, wrap around. I'm going to start with my heaters. I'm going to start with my rear heater first and make sure it works on low and high. Check my middle heater, low and high. Check my defroster, low and high. Check my front heater, low and high. And they work. I'm going to my windshield wiper. I'm going to turn it on low and high. I'm going to push on the windshield wiper button to make sure I have washer fluid. Then I'm going to go right up here to my inside lights, check my dome lights for passengers, it works. Check my dome light, it works. This is my heater mirror to defrost my mirror in cold weather, it works. Then I'm going to check my steering wheel to make sure it doesn't have more than 2 inches of play in a 20-inch wheel. And I'm going to make sure my horn works. Okay, with that, I'm going to go to my panel. I'm going to check my panel lights. I'm going to do a left turn, a right turn, a hazard, and I'm going to turn my lights on and do a high beam and a low beam to make sure that works. Then I'm going to do a check on all of my gauges. I will check my oil and water to make sure they're in the proper operating range. I'm going to check my volts to make sure it's between 12 and 14. Check my transmission, make sure it's below 300 degrees. Check my air gauges, make sure they are at least 120. Also, my fuel is adequate. Then I'm going to check my depth fluid gauge over here, make sure it's half a tank or greater. Check my amp gauge, make sure it's in the positive range. With that, I'm going to do an external light check. And I will ask the examiner to assist me in doing this, ask them to step to the front of the bus. When they do, I'm going to display all my lights all the way around the bus to make sure they work. I'm going to start with my yellow lights up front on the bus that we use for drop-off pickup students, make sure they work. Then I'm going to turn my red lights on to make sure they work, get a thumbs up. Then I'm going to do a left turn, a right turn, a hazard, and high beam. And I get an okay from the examiner. Examiner will come to the window. I would ask them to check the clearance lights on this side, plus the left turn signal / hazard lights, and also check my stop arm to make sure it works. Gets a thumbs up on that. Then I will ask the examiner to go to the back of the bus and check all of my lights, including my tag light. So the examiner will go to the back so I can see the examiner, and then I will start again with the top of my bus on the lights. I'm going to turn my caution lights on and my red lights on for drop-off pickup students. Gives me a thumbs up on that. Then I'm going to turn a left turn, right turn, hazards. Then I'm going to check my brake lights by applying the brakes, and also put it in reverse to check the backup lights. Gives me a thumbs up on that, and all those lights are working. Now she's going to come to the side of the bus. I'm going to open the door, and I'm going to ask to check my clearance lights on the right side, also my right turn signal / hazards, and then I'm going to ask her to check my loading light both inside and outside to make sure they are working properly. She gives me a thumbs up, they are, comes in, I'm going to close the door. Now I'm going to perform a brake check. There are 3 things I need to do to start the brake check. I'm going to make sure I've got a minimum of 120 psi in my air tank. Make sure I'm in neutral. I'm going to release the parking brake and make sure the bus does not roll. Then I'm going to check to see if I have a leak in my system. So to do that, I'm going to turn the engine off, turn the key back on. Now I'm going to hold the brake pedal down securely, and for 1 minute I'm going to check to make sure I don't lose more than 3 psi in 1 minute in my air tank, starting now. So I sit for 1 minute and watch it. 1 minute's up. I've not lost more than 3 psi. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the air out of the system, and to do that the engine has got to be off. So I'm going to start pumping the brakes And when the air gauge gets to about 60 psi, my low air warning light should come on and the alarm. And there it is. I continue to pump the brakes. At about 40 to 30 psi, my parking brake is going to pop out. And there it is. So I've taken all the air out of the system. That was done with the engine off. Now I'm going to put air back in the system. And I'm going to start the bus. I'm going to accelerate to 1500 RPM. And I'm going to start watching the air gauge, and when it gets to 60 psi, the low air brake warning light and alarm should go off. And there it is. Now I'm going to continue at 1500 RPM until I get to 85. At 85, I'm going to reduce to 1000 RPM and see how long it takes to get from 85 to 100. Should be no more than 45 seconds starting now. And it takes 20 seconds. I keep it at 1000 RPM until it reaches 110. At 110, I release it to normal idle, and the governor should shut the compressor off about 120. Okay, there it is. Now, we've taken that out, and now we're going to check the brake system and make sure it works. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is check our parking brake. I'm going to put it in drive, and I'm going to press the accelerator, and the parking brake holds. Now I'm going to check my service brake, make sure it holds. It's already in gear. I'm going to release the parking brake. I'm going to pull forward to 5 miles an hour, and at 5 miles an hour I will press on my service brake. It stops the bus. I release the wheel to make sure it doesn't pull left or right, and that includes the brake check. Okay, now that we've completed the inside pre-trip, we're going to do the outside of the pre-trip. I'm going to start with the front of the bus. I'm going to start my clearance lights up front. They're yellow in front, and back they're red. I'm going to check with my stop lights, my caution lights, my windshield, my turn signal / hazards, my headlights, my mirrors to make sure they're all clean, not cracked or broken or missing. Then I'm going to check my windshield wipers to make sure they are secure to the bus. Check my blades to make sure they are secure and not excessively worn and lying flat against the window. Check all my mirror brackets to make sure they are secure, no missing screws, nuts, or bolts. Then I'm going to go to the side of the bus. I'm going to turn the wheel to the right so I can see what I'm looking for. I'm going to check first underneath. I'm going to check my leaf springs to make sure they're not shifted, cracked, broken, or missing. I'm going to check both my front and rear mounts to make sure they are secure and not damaged. I'm going to check both of my U-bolts here to make sure they are present and secure, not damaged. I'll check my shock absorber here to make sure it is secure, not leaking. If it was leaking, it'd be right in the middle of the shock absorber. Then I'm going to check my brakes. I'm going to check my brake chamber here to make sure it is secure to the bus and not damaged. Inside the brake chamber is a push rod and slack adjuster. I can't see that. I'm going to make sure my hoses going to the brake chamber are not damaged or leaks and they're attached properly. I'm also going to check out here my brake rotor, which is right here, to make sure it is secure. It is not grooved nor have any debris like grease or oil on it. Then here I'm going to check under my calipers if I could see them. Check my brake pads to make sure they're not excessively worn. Then I'm going to check my tire, make sure it has a minimum of 4 32 inches of tread on the tire, and you may not have recaps or retreads on the tire. I'm going to check my sidewall to make sure there are no damage, no bulges, cracks, cuts, or anything, any damage. Check my rim to make sure it is not dented, cracked, and no weld spots on it. Check my valve stem to make sure it is undamaged, has a cap on it, Here I would use a air gauge to check to make sure I have 110 pounds of pressure. Check all my lug nuts to make sure there's no distortion or damage to those. Check to make sure they're all tight. If they were loose, there would be shiny threads or rust trails. I'm going to check my hub oil seal here to make sure it is secure, not leaking. Then I check my mud flap to make sure it's secure and not damaged. Then I'm going to check my side of my bus. I'm going to start with my clearance lights, my windows, my left side turn signal / hazards, and my reflectors. Make sure they're clean, not cracked, broken, or missing. Go back to my emergency exit windows, make sure they're properly marked and outlined in reflective tape. Then I'm going to go to my fuel door. Make sure it opens and closes properly. Make sure the fuel cap is on tight and not leaking. And underneath you would check your fuel tank to make sure it is secure and there are no leaks to it, no leaks from the hoses. Then I'm going to go to the back tire, and here I would repeat the pre-trip for my suspension system and my brake system, just like I did up front. So I would say all that again. And I would have to point it out. And to do that, I would have to get under the bus and point it out from the back of the wheels. Then I'm going to check my rear wheels here. You must have a minimum of 2/32 inches of tread here. You may have recaps or retreads back here. Make sure there's no obstruction between the wheels. Check the sidewalls. We will do that exactly like we did up front. Same thing with the rim. Same thing with the valve stem and the lug nuts and my axle cap. And then we do the same thing with the mud flap. So we repeat all that again, just like we did up front. Okay, now we're at the back of the bus. First thing we're going to check is the lighting system. We're going to check up top at my clearance lights. Again, my red lights and caution lights, yellows. My window, my turn signal / hazards, my 4 brake lights, my backup lights, my tag light, and my reflectors. To make sure they're clean, not cracked, broken, or missing. Go back to my emergency exit window, make sure it's properly marked, outlined in reflective tape. Then I'm going to go to my engine compartment, and I'm going to check underneath the bus to make sure I don't have any leaks from my engine underneath the bus. Then I'm going to start with my engine compartment. On the top up here are all my fluids, so I'm going to take them first. Check my coolant tank to make sure it's secure to the bus. I'm going to check my sight gauges. I have 2 of them here to see if I'm low on fluid. If I am, I'll put the coolant in right here. Then I'm going to go over here to my oil. Here's my oil dipstick. Take it out, wipe it off, reinsert it, take it out again. If I need to add oil, I'll add it right here. It's my transmission fluid. That has to be checked with the engine running. If it needs additional transmission fluid, I would add it right here. It's my power steering fluid here. Make sure it's adequately filled. If not, I would add it right here. Then I'm going to check my alternator. Make sure my alternator is secure to the bus, not damaged. I'm going to check my water pump. Make sure it's secure to the bus, not damaged, not leaking. If it's leaking, you could see water on the ground. I'm going to check all my belts to make sure they are secure, not frayed, cut, or worn in any way. There are 2 units on here that are not belt driven. That's the compressor and the power steering unit. They're in the back of the bus. You can't see them. They are gear driven. Then I'm going to check all my hoses. Make sure my hoses all are attached properly and there are no leaks in any of my hoses. Then I'm going to check my electrical systems. Make sure my wires are all attached properly and there are no bare wires anywhere or no loose wires anywhere. Okay, now we're going to this side of the bus. We only check on this bus what is unique to this side of the bus. So if it's duplicated on this side and we've already pre-tripped it on the other side, we do not have to repeat that on this side. So I'm going to open my door here. First thing I'm going to check is I'm going to check my exhaust system. Make sure it is secure to the bus. Make sure there are no leaks. If there were leaks, there would be rust or soot on the exhaust system. I'm going to check also my frame to make sure my frame is straight, not bent, no cracks, no weld spots on it. We'll check my stop arm. Make sure it is secure to the bus. Make sure my glass is clean, not cracked, broken, or missing. Make sure my wires here are all attached properly and there are no loose or bare wires. I'm going to check my DEF tank here. Make sure the door operates properly. Check my tank, make sure it is secure. The cap is on tight and the cap is not leaking. Then I'm going to check my drive shaft. Way back here under the bus is my drive shaft. I'm going to make sure my drive shaft is not broken or damaged or bent in any way. Make sure the couplings are secure with no trash. Then I'm going to go to the emergency exit door. I'm going to check to make sure it is properly marked and outlined in reflective tape. To open, I would pull up on the handle and pull out. And my door, or my stop arm here, I would check that exactly like I did that one over there. My last thing on the external pre-trip is my steering linkage. I'm going to touch my gearbox right here, my steering gearbox right there, to make sure it's attached properly. There are no leaks in it, it's secure. Then I'm going to check my pitman arm, my drag link, and back here is my tie rod. I'm going to check it back here. And from the steering gearbox to the wheel, there are no missing nuts, bolts, or cotter pins, and the sockets and joints are not damaged. And that concludes the external part of the pre-trip. Thank you for viewing this. I hope it helps anyone who's preparing for a CDL license. I've had the privilege of working at Union now for 12 years. Been training for 15 years, driving a bus for 15 years. And Union's been a great place to work. I've enjoyed it. It's been a good employer for me. And hope you enjoy it as well. Thank you.